Live on WFLA Now. This is Run for Fun with running enthusiast Lee Spann.
All right, let's go. Welcome back to the Stream Center for this week's episode of Run for Fun. It's a show we designed to help more people find the joy in running, that it can be so much more than just racing to a finish line or worse, a punishment. A regular running routine can help your mental and your physical well-being, but you have to implement that routine in the right way so it doesn't end up being a drain on your body. So I'm your host, meteorologist Lee Spann at WFLA in Tampa. I'm an avid runner, and I have been can be the first to admittedly tell you I did all the wrong things some 14 years ago when I started running, and I was lucky enough to find a group of people to show me the way, as it were, and how much fun running can be if you just do it right. And of course, the leader of that group who continues to teach me these things, Coach Maria. Hey, good morning.
Hey, I'm so happy to be back in the studio, and I am so excited about today's show.
We are. We talk about this a lot. It comes up almost in every one of our shows that we do, just making sure that you're eating enough and supporting what you what you're trying to do, what you're trying to build in this life. But we're bringing in what, in my world is basically a famous sports nutritionist for today.
Absolutely. I've worked with Megan.
Hey, Megan. This is Megan Featherstone, and she travels around the country shouting from the rooftop about nutrition and what to do. So welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's always a great conversation to make sure everybody's fueling adequately for the running that we're expecting our body to do.
Yep.
We especially appreciate your Instagram account because I'm constantly telling people who to follow and who not to follow. And I'm always like, Megan, just follow Megan.
I appreciate that. Greatest form of flattery is sending people my way. So
yeah,
thank you.
that's right.
So Megan, let's start by how you got into running, and then specifically how you got into helping people in their nutrition needs for running.
Yeah, so similar to what you were saying, Lee, I just decided I needed a challenge in life after, college and grad school and, landing my first job. I was a little bit bored. So I was like, well, okay, what can we do now? And a friend had run a marathon and I was like, oh gosh, if Ashley can run a marathon, I can totally run a marathon, So that was my first ever road race, was a marathon. And just like you were saying, I did so many things wrong just across the board. Didn't understand the importance of electrolytes for hydration. And I'm a heavy sweater. Didn't even know what gels were, or that we were supposed to be taking carbohydrates. So at the time, I was a dietitian and I was like, okay, if I'm confused by this, how does anybody know what we're supposed to be doing? And this was back in 2009. So sports nutrition research has come a very long way since then. So I really dove into the sports nutrition research to understand why we should do certain things. And then just began kind of sharing that information casually. And now it's a full-time gig here.
Yeah, that's so great. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I started coaching in 2006 and we did not have the research we have now. And it is evolving like daily. Like I constantly have to keep up on the new recommendations, which is why I appreciate your account so much, Megan, because she's always very research based and she always puts a lot of research behind what she does. And it's just everything is moving so quickly. We've just realized that our nutrition needs as athletes are so different than the regular population.
And this actually makes me feel good because I felt like I was just doing it all wrong and everyone else knew. 14 years ago is a significant amount of time. I mean, for the research to have changed and to more, everyone is finding out these things and about electrolytes and about all the carbs that we need.
Yeah.
I just felt like I was, the only one. So this actually makes me feel good that the research continues to change in the last 14 years.
Yeah. The big one,
absolutely.
and what we're going to talk about today is that there was a lot of research on like overtraining, and that was like the big deal. Like probably about, I would say 10 years ago, it was like overtraining. But now through research, we realize that a lot of overtraining has to do with nutrition. And it has more to do with under-recovering than it does with working and effort. Of course, you can overtrain still, but if you're fueling your body properly, it's a lot less hard to overtrain than it is if you're fueling properly.
And I think that's really one of the things we push a lot, Megan, because if we named a podcast Run for Fun, when you're running underfueled, it is not fun. I mean, we just showed a picture of you running a marathon, biggest smile. I mean, you are the epitome of running for fun, but you have to put in the work to make that fun. And you can't just get out there like we did, however many years ago when we first ran our first marathons and just try to, push through it.
Right. And why we say the majority of us as runners are doing this for fun.
Yeah.
This isn't our livelihood. Even though I work in the running space, my marathons have nothing to do with my career, right? We are literally doing this for fun. So I love the name of you guys' podcast. So in order to have fun, we need to be well fueled, because those carbohydrates that we're taking in while we're running, the smile on my face in the London Marathon, yes, those carbs are fueling our muscles, but they're also fueling our brain. So if we're under fueling a long run, a race, not only are we underperforming and not allowing our body to have the substrates that it needs to perform at our finest, but we also don't have nearly as much fun when we're carbohydrate depleted in our brain.
Absolutely
So
true.
And I feel like we all did that, when we first started. That's why I said, and I just assumed that you just felt lightheaded all the time, and that you just felt, annoyed at the world when you were done with the run. I never knew it could be fun until I started eating and drinking enough.
Yeah. Well, I hate to admit this, Megan, in your presence, but in 2011, I decided I did a carb depleted training cycle and then introduced carbs during the run. And I actually had a very good run, but the performance drop afterwards, it was terrible on my body, and I had to rehab myself. So, I mean, that a lot of the research then was saying fat adapt, and it's so different now. Now they say absolutely not. So I definitely did do it incorrectly before I did it correctly. But tell us a little bit about what low, because a lot of people are hearing the word low energy availability now. Do you mind talking a little bit about what that is, what it means, what some of the symptoms and signs are?
Sure. So when we're looking at energy availability, we're looking at how much nutrition, aka energy, our body has left over after we are running. So we need a certain amount of energy to fuel our running, to fuel our training. But then our body is a finely tuned machine that needs a ton of energy just to be healthy, right? To support our heart rate, to support all of our daily body functions, to support fertility, bone health, all of these types of things. So we want to make sure that not only are we fueling for those runs, but then we also have enough leftover energy to have a healthy body outside of running. So that's what we're looking at when we talk about energy availability. So, in the research world, we calculate like how much total energy or calories someone is taking in, and then we figure out how much is left over after exercise, and we get this number of how many calories per kilogram of fat-free body mass someone has, and that's how we determine if we have adequate energy availability or if we're under fueling, under training, all those, terms that we were using earlier. So some of the symptoms that you might notice is like a delayed recovery, fatigue, brain fog, more sore muscles. Those would be like really early signs, kind of like an intolerance to training. And then if we have low energy availability for too long, that's where we're going to start to see injury risk increase, bone injuries, maybe not a full stress fracture. Maybe it's just like a stress reaction, something like that. For females, we're going to see absence or changes in our normal menstrual cycles. For men, it takes a little bit longer to see some of those testosterone disturbances, but we absolutely see that in men as well. We see, mood disturbances, irritability, higher anxiety. I mean, you name it. Every single system in our body is negatively affected when we are underfueled or have low energy availability as a runner.
The interesting thing that I saw in research recently was even if you have adequate calorie intake, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, Megan, but I believe what I read was that even if you have adequate calorie intake, if you're in a deficit for too long after a workout, you can still show signs of low energy availability. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's kind of
correct.
scary to me for a lot of my athletes, because especially in the summer here, it's extremely difficult to run, and people just get very nauseous. I mean, it was 81 at 5:30 this morning. So they delay that eating a lot because they have stomach issues or they're just nausea from the heat.
Mm-hmm. So timing is just as important to me as what we're eating. So when we look at what you're describing in the research is called intraday energy availability. So even if at the end of the day, our body has gotten the energy that it needs to sustain both our running and our training, our recovery, our daily body functions, if at any point in the day we got too far in a hole, like too far in an energy deficit. So an example of that would be a morning runner. All of you guys down in the Tampa area are running very early because it's hot. So what we're finding is that if you roll out of bed and you're running so early, you forget to eat beforehand and then you run. And then as you're noticing, you're not eating soon enough after. We're in a very big energy deficit in the front half of our day. And even if we eat enough, like say lunch and dinner are huge, but we've gone for 10 hours without giving our body what it needs, our body is going to react and perform as though it did not have enough energy throughout that day. So it is very important to not just get enough total energy to support, but we need to be really smart about the timing of our nutrition when we're training.
And my question is, so I understand sort of the basic subtraction, right? How much energy or calories you eat, then you use some of that to exercise, and then your body needs a certain amount to pump the heart, digestive issue, digestive system and everything. How do you know what
Good
you need
question,
for that? Because it's like, I know I can kind of guess how much calories I eat. I can kind of guess how much calories I used for my run, but the other part, I don't know how much it takes to pump my heart.
And it's very different for everybody.
Yeah.
And, to be completely transparent, I really don't recommend that we're tracking these calories and macros and, making sure that we're getting the 45 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass. Like, I don't even know if I'm getting that on a daily basis, right? So to your point, we do need some of those tangible feedback markers from our body and really listening to our body and our performance and our recovery to try to determine, like, are we getting enough? And you're right, it can be very nuanced because, as Maria alluded to, it's very different for every athlete. So I think we want to be honest with ourselves and honest with our running coach and making sure that we're really thinking about how am I recovering? How am I feeling? And then I think using some general parameters of solid nutrition for our running, of never running fasted, always make sure we're eating something before our run, fuel any run over 70 minutes, always carry fluid with
Megan,
you.
can you say that one more time?
There's somebody in the back.
For somebody in the back, never run fasted. Did you
Never
hear that?
run fasted. Yes. Yes.
There's
no
excuse.
Thing.
It's a big thing right now. And it makes me crazy. But I love that you said, talk to your coach about it, because the reality of it is too. And I've been, electrolytes play a huge role in being nauseous. And I have a lot of people that say, oh, I have stomach issues. Oh, I have stomach issues. Oh, I have stomach issues. A lot of it is heat related. A lot of it's running too hard for the weather that we have. It's okay. Like, in training, we train hard, but it should be doable. You shouldn't be training to the point where you're vomiting or not able to complete something. And if you're constantly nauseous, it might be a little bit too much of an effort for your body. So you kind of got to find that balance with your coach and with your nutritionist on what's going to work and what's not going to work.
So if you are noticing that that you feel sort of run down the rest of the day, even if you feel like, okay, I thought I was doing everything right. Okay, but I feel like this after a hard workout I'm not doing. So what do I do? Just eat more? Eat, is that sort of like the first go, just eat more?
Yeah, and I think it's making sure we have the pieces and parts in place. So are we eating before a run, right? Are we fueling runs that are over 70 to 80 minutes? Are we eating within an hour after our runs? Are we eating all of the macronutrients on our plate? So do we have carbs? Do we have protein? Do we have fat? So those are just some simple questions to ask yourself. Are we getting those opportunities of nutrition in surrounding our run? Because to our point earlier, we really want to make sure that run is surrounded with adequate nutrition so we're not getting too far in an energy deficit at any point during the day. And then from there, again, just making sure that those meals are balanced throughout the day and being honest with ourselves about how is our sleep? How is our recovery? How is our running performance? Which, to you guys' point, is really hard to notice when it's hot like this. But, it's knowing what's normal for us and recognizing when those symptoms maybe are different than what's normal for us and taking a look at, is it just that I need to slow down? Am I just dehydrated, or is this a nutrition issue? So sometimes it takes a little bit of troubleshooting.
Absolutely.
And that's so, and you would consider that, just like the rundown, that's what we would consider low energy availability? Because again, this it seems sort of, I think people want real parameters as what
Yeah,
is
we all
low
do.
energy availability.
Unfortunately, we can't give
Yeah.
specific
Yeah.
parameters every time. I wish we could.
Yeah.
But I will say, I guess the good question that I would ask Megan is, I do have a few athletes who, well, I would say borderline orthorexia, very strong into the racing weight mentality. And performance has been a struggle for a while. And so if someone comes to you and their performance is just, and I'm not talking about just plateauing, I'm talking about people that were running like 3:30 marathons and can barely run 4 hours and are a struggle.
Yeah.
Do you actually suggest time off in that situation and fueling your body, or, like what, I don't know what the recommendations are really for severe low energy availability, but I do think that there's a significant amount of recreational athletes that have some sort of this, and it's not just women, it's men too.
Correct.
I see it over the years. Usually they get away with losing weight at first and they're feeling great, they have good performance gains, and then they just go off a cliff. What do you suggest in those sorts of situations?
Yeah. And that's exactly how we see this show up in a lot of people, is performance actually is better at the beginning of underfueling, and then it tanks. So
Yeah.
we have this perception that we have to break in a lot of our athletes' minds of, but wait, it was better for a minute.
Yeah,
But
I
then
work
we see
through
it
it all the
tank.
time. Yep.
So that's a very hard thing to break for an athlete but I did have that one standout performance. And we can see this even in professional runners as well.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I mean, truthfully, we know the athlete has to be ready to change. We can't force a change. So when somebody comes to me in those circumstances, we'll definitely have a bunch of lab work drawn so we can look at tangibly, typically ferritin is bottomed out when somebody is underfueling. So there's some things that we can tangibly look at and make some changes so that we feel like we have an eye on the situation and that we're making these good changes to be able to run faster. And then we're going to identify like, where's the biggest bang for our buck from nutrition changes? Because throwing a ton of changes at people or just saying, eat more, is typically not effective in this population. We need to hook them slowly by making some changes that they notice that they're actually feeling better, because most of us run because we absolutely love running in our life and we love how running makes us feel and the accomplishment of achieving things within running races, running community. So if we can help them by fueling them better, feel better running, that's usually the ticket to kind of start to break those negative thoughts between food and body image. Because most people care more about running and running performance than they do their body image. We just have to get them to the point where they're feeling better running so that they start to eat more. So for everybody, that's going to look a little bit different. Maybe it's focusing on a recovery meal. Maybe it's eating more at dinner. Maybe it's a snack before bed, but just kind of slowly starting to make those changes. And then over time, building that really solid fueling plan to help these athletes. But, as far as you were saying, Maria, sometimes we do have to take a step back.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes maybe that's the proactive means that we need to be like, oh man, I really got to take this seriously because I don't want to be without running in my life. So I better change my nutrition.
And it feels a little bit like an internal injury. It's just not like with a stress fracture, you get a stress fracture and you're like, oh, I need to take 8 to 12 weeks off. But with an internal low energy availability injury, you don't really have that. You can still run. And so it might be miserable, but you don't have that like outside injury that's like, hey, you have to stop. It's just, so it does take a little bit of discipline to kind of get out of it. And I usually back my runners off a little bit from the distance stuff and try to, help the energy availability that way a little bit while we're recovering and adding in more nutrition. But a lot of my people that are doing really, really well have nutritionists. I've sent a lot to Megan. We have Jen that takes on people too. And if you need help with it, go talk to somebody about it.
Well, because it's going to help you run. But I mean, some of the things Megan was saying, like you get to that second level. So the low energy availability, you might feel like crap. But then when it goes on and it's chronic, then you have real issues that really might push, make you stop running or make you, unfortunately, have injuries and bigger ailments. And what does that look like?
So, it's interesting you bring that up because they did a really good study in endurance athletes, specifically runners, that was looking at what are the consequences of underfueling in the short term, in the long term. So what they found is that we actually do see negative consequences to our performance within days of underfueling. just days. So, we see a decreased power output, decreased well-being, decreased muscle performance just within a few days. And then if we look at like what happens if we're going weeks to months with underfueling, whether it's intentional or not, we see that we have a decreased running speed, increased injury risk. We're not able to pace internally like we usually are. We
Yeah,
kind of
because
get out of touch with like,
it feels different,
right,
right? Yeah.
right,
Interesting.
what it feels like, major mood disturbances, decrease in strength, decrease in muscle mass. So we do see those changes that could be within a few weeks of a training cycle, up to a month or two. And then those long-term consequences are obviously the more severe ones where we see, no longer producing fertility hormones and, our menstrual cycle shutting down or very low testosterone in men, muscle injuries, bone stress injuries, those are kind of the bigger term things, very decreased resting heart rate, right? That's like our body screaming, I don't have enough energy. That's always very frightening to me when somebody's heart, resting heart rate drops pretty low. So there's, every
Oh, when
system
it
in our
drops
body
too
is
low?
going to, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's a
Because
very protective measure.
Because I'm
Mhm.
always like, oh, my resting heart rate is low. So, but if it
Yeah.
goes, if it's where it is, and then all of a sudden it drops, like you're looking
Yeah.
for the change, right? No, okay.
Yeah.
I was feeling good about my
So
resting heart rate.
tell
So
me,
anyway.
why does that happen? I don't know about that actually.
Because our cardiac function we literally don't have enough energy. So our
Oh,
heart rate just gets very, very slow to try to preserve energy.
interesting.
Yeah. So an athlete with a heart rate in the mid to high 30s is like screaming red flag, like we are
Oh,
not consuming
interesting.
enough. Mm-hmm.
Also, can you tell us why ferritin drops so low? Because we do have we struggle with a lot of ferritin in
Yeah.
my female athletes
Yep.
anyway. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it goes back to the same thing. It takes energy to create those red blood cells, to transport that iron. So ferritin is our storage form of iron. So if our body is just looking for iron everywhere and we can't quite make those red blood cells and support our body's iron stores, that's just going to tank, and our body is not going to put the energy towards trying to increase that ferritin. So no matter how we're supplementing, if I see somebody that isn't responding to a supplement, we think about, is our GI tract working? Right? Is there something behind the scenes from like a celiac perspective or blood loss that we need to be looking into? And if it's check, 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 no, all of that is fine, then it's like, we're probably not eating enough. This is probably, we're
Interesting.
not going to improve our ferritin until we're eating adequate calories. So it's
Yeah,
like, we're kind of chasing our tail with a supplement in the background.
And I actually read the other day that with all the fasting, people are struggling with getting their ferritin high enough as runners too, because they're skipping a whole meal. So then we're already struggle to get enough iron in with 3 or 4 meals a day. If you take another meal out, then that's another meal you don't get ferritin, or iron. But yeah, it's so interesting to me, all of this stuff.
And
It
so
is. It's all intertwined.
I mean, it's amazing. It's actually amazing how our bodies protect ourselves. Like, I think
Yes.
we get caught in the negativity of it all, but the reality of it is like, wow, our bodies are so unbelievable at protecting us from danger.
and
Pretty cool.
Yes. But then we need to, once it protects us, we need to figure out
Now,
so it
yeah.
doesn't constantly
So,
be, constantly protect us.
We don't want it in flight or fight all the time.
Right.
Yeah,
it's very
So, Megan, one of the things that I know you from is from all of your amazing social media. So you have is it freaking True Friday, which answers questions we've all wondered about. And basically, you're letting everyone know the joys of eating and why you need to eat. So what brought you to social media to get this message out, and how did you get so good at it?
Well, I wanted to know where you came up with
Practice.
It's Freaking True Friday, because I love it. Like, it's like my favorite day of the week.
I love it. I got to get back on him. I've been slacking on him the past 6 months or so. Exactly the reasons we were just talking about is one of the biggest reasons I got onto social media, is because there's so much misconception out there. There were so many things floating around the running community that just weren't true, or maybe they were true. So to our earlier conversation about fasted running, I went on one long run fasted because I had read the exact same research you had read, that it could potentially help us with performance adaptations on race day. I felt so terrible. I got lost. I was dizzy. I was nauseous. I was like, I'm never doing this again. This is sucking the joy out of running. But if somebody read that research and then never kept up with some of the changes in it, we're still seeing these things circulating the internet as to being recommended by people who don't have the expertise to really look through that research and interpret that research and apply that research to runners. So that was really my goal of these Freaking True Friday posts that I started, I think, in 2019. was to kind of like very gently debunk some of the things that were out there. And if people wanted the research, they wanted the PMID numbers of where the research studies came from, that I could be a resource for people, to answer some of those questions that were out there.
It's so helpful because it is true. Our industry is changing so much all the time. And I'm talking
So
to you
fast.
coaches out here too. Coaches, if you're not on it, you need to be on it.
Yeah.
Stay on it. Stay on the research. And if you want to help your athletes, you've got to, like, even 6 or 7 years ago, they were saying we only needed 100 calories an hour for fueling. And now the recommendations are 200 to 300 an hour. And so stay on it, coaches. Keep reading. Just because you learned it in some kind of class at one point, you got to stay on your research.
And Megan, one of the things I saw, you actually showed us how you carry all of your nutrition for a marathon. And that is something that we needed to know, that, as someone saying, if I now have to have 200 calories an hour, I don't have enough pockets, or then I can't do it. But you're like, no, here's how I do it. And here's how I carry every one of these. And
I don't know that I've seen this.
Oh, it's great.
Okay.
It's how she can carry 6 of those big gels, right? 6 of them?
Yeah. I think it was 6 or 7. Yeah. It was in between, like I had like a shelf crop top on and then a sports bra. So they were in between the shelf in the crop top and my sports bra. So they weren't like rubbing against, because you don't want to chafe. They can't be rubbing anywhere. It was a very last minute decision. It was a top that was sent to me that I needed to wear. And I was like, there's no pockets. And I'm like, this is going to have to work. And it worked beautifully. So we just have to get very creative as to where we're putting things.
Yeah.
We have plenty of options. That definitely shouldn't be the deterrent for us, but we have to practice too.
But then it's so inspiring, for lack of a better word, to see, she ate all those calories. She's in every picture, she looks like she is having the most joyous time.
Yeah.
And that makes other people want to then say, okay, well, if she ate and and did that time and looks that happy, then maybe I can add at least another gel. Maybe just a little bit more of an inspiration to say it can work. Here's how it's working.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a runner recently say to me, I can't remember which elite runner that it was, that ran a marathon on one gel. And the client came to me and said, yeah, coach, well, so-and-so ran her best marathon on a one gel. And I was like, was it her best marathon? I mean, it might have been her best marathon, but
could it have been better?
Could it have been better? I'm like, it's nice to see people like you out there showing what you're doing in order to perform well, because you're quite the marathoner yourself. So it's nice to see people fueling correctly.
Yeah, I think, when I first started this back, I think it was 2017, I kind of slowly started this as a side project. And finally in 2019, broke the 3-hour barrier, which was like an hour faster than my first marathon. And honestly, I attribute this to nutrition. My training wasn't all that awesome at that point. Since then, we've worked on that piece. But from there, I had eaten 8 bagels to carb load, and I didn't think anything of it. I was traveling. I love bagels. I was comfortable eating that many of them. There wasn't a whole lot else eaten that day, but that's what I did. And I went on a podcast and talked about it and instantly blew up the internet that Megan ate 8 bagels. And I remember still to this day being like, why was that so crazy that I did that? And then I was like, because people are so underfueled and don't realize what our body actually needs to perform at its finest. So, in retrospect, I was like, I guess it was kind of neat that people were able to see 8 bagels equaled a huge marathon PR for Megan, and it's really just giving your body the fuel that it needs to perform, which is a little counterintuitive. I would never eat 8 bagels for fun in a day if I wasn't running a marathon. It's not typical nutrition advice, but it's what our body needs to perform in a task such as a marathon, which is a daunting task to ask our body to do for anyone.
Well, I loved it because it was right around that research that came in that I was so shocked about when it came in, when they said, carbo loading doesn't, do you remember this? When they said carbo loading doesn't work for women.
For women,
and I was like, what? Like, this is going against, and then like, what was it, like a year and a half later, it was like, oh no, women just were under fueling. So they were just getting adequate fuel by carbo loading instead of like being in a surplus to go into a marathon. So it actually had nothing to do with that. It's just that women are constantly under-carbed, mostly because of the internet. But
exactly.
And they're afraid of carbohydrates.
I pulled all that research that people were quoting saying it didn't work for women. And it was just so blatantly clear that all they told these participants to do was eat more carbs. So when they really calculated what that meant for men versus women, women weren't eating enough carbs, even eating extra, to actually carb load. We know how many grams of carbs we need per day to carb load, and they weren't hitting it. And then when we found a study that women actually were hitting it, shocking, it worked.
Shocking.
So really
it did
is
work.
just, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's also why you
Yeah.
got to be careful of those studies, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of studies that just are not accurate or need to work through a few studies to get, accurate information on. So it's been, we appreciate your work so much, Megan. And thanks for making it readily available for all of us coaches. Because sometimes it's hard for us to weed through it too. We're not quite as science-minded as you nutritionists, dietitians are. So we appreciate that.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Also, we want to talk about your event coming up, because I have a whole group going, and you remember, On Track, this is a group event. It is on July 31st in St. Pete. Tell us a little bit about it.
We are very excited to come see you all in St. Pete. We've heard of the amazing running community that you all have created down there. So we're very excited. When I say we, it's me and my other Meg counterpart. So the Megs, quote unquote, have been on tour this summer with ASICS for the Move Your Mind tour. We did this last year with a hydration focus. And then this year we're doing it more on a holistic, move your mind focus. So we were at 3 different stops last week. We were in Boulder and Chicago and Nashville. We've done New York. We're doing a bunch more. So we're very excited to bring that down to you guys. It'll be a group run. Come ask any nutrition questions that you have throughout, the time that we are there. We'll stay after and socialize and, have something to eat or something to drink afterwards. And it has just been an amazing way to bring together the running community. We've had, hundreds of runners at each location, and I know St. Pete will be no different. So even though it'll be toasty, we are very excited to run a few miles with you all.
It will be toasty.
Get to know you. Yeah.
You've had some pretty big numbers at these events. Is there a cap on these, or are you guys like as many runners as you can have?
I think we've gotten to almost to 1,000, and I think they capped the registration at 1,000.
Wow.
So yeah,
That's
we've
incredible.
had anywhere from probably 250 to 800 people at each event so far, which is great. I love them when they're a little bit smaller because it's a little more intimate, but also the huge crowds are awesome too. So, I think any size crowd is always really enjoyable.
And you're, and one of the things I think people want to come to is to talk to you and ask questions. So what are some of the questions you get, almost like sort of a habitual question at every one?
Yeah. So we have a podcast called Fuel for the Soul, where we talk all things nutrition and hydration for runners. So the picture you guys are looking at was our first live podcast. So questions came from the audience. I didn't know what they were going to be. And to your question, a lot of them are very similar. So it's like, is it possible to get too much sodium? That has been a very pertinent question recently. Anything's possible, right? A lot of it is going to go back to like, how sweaty are we? How much are we losing? But most of us are probably not getting too much sodium when we're training through the summer. We probably actually need to focus on getting a little more.
Especially us down here.
Oh, yeah.
77 Duplin.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for the duration, I always go in July. Everybody's hot. I mean, I saw Megan was hot. My husband was running. He was sweaty, and I'm like, okay, so everybody's in it in July. It's for us. It's like it still feels like this in October, and I feel like the length
like
of
good
time
5 months
can
us.
Really take its toll on you. So you really have to be super careful.
Got to stay on
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so when do you get to St. Pete? Do you know? And is it a tour that week? You going any other cities?
Yes. So we have an interesting turnaround for St. Pete. So we will get to you guys, I believe, the morning of the event, and then we'll have that event in the evening. And then we have to turn around and leave the next morning pretty early because we have an event up in Connecticut the next night. So like 24 hours after yours, we have to try to get up to Connecticut, which is a layover and a couple Uber rides. So fingers crossed that we can pull this off. My travel luck is typically delayed. So, hopefully we don't get my luck.
Everybody's MO these days, but well, we appreciate your coming down. We're so excited. And I know some people are intimidated by you because they put you on this pedestal, but I have met Megan numerous times, and she's been she's so personable and humble and fun to talk to. And anytime I send my runners anywhere, I'm like, go see Megan. They always take a picture with her, and she's always really fun to talk to.
How did you then go from being a sports dietitian to be able to work with ASICS and to be able to, the Abbott World Majors, like sent you around to, I mean, is it through social media?
Yes, I think it's 100% through social media. So I always say some of the best opportunities that I've had from a career have really landed in my lap. Someone has noticed something that's going on and they were like, wait, I want her to be a part of something else. And then it all just grows from there. So there's been, minimal pitches. Like I pitched an idea to ASICS about a cookbook a few years back. So that kind of like hooked me in with them a little tighter. And then working the Fuel for the Soul, I work with the Believe in the Run crew, who has beautiful relationships with different, apparel and shoe companies. So, that has obviously been very helpful from the networking side of things. But yeah, somebody followed somebody that recommended, they watched me and they're like, wait, we want to, you want to come run the 6 majors with us? I was like, absolutely, I do, so it's been, I think it's a testament to the wonderful community that runners are. We really appreciate each other and we really want each other to continue to grow and develop and be stronger together. So when we find resources that are helpful with that, I think we just kind of innately like share those, which,
sure.
Has really helped my career. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And not to mention what are the things that you eat? Why am I forgetting the things that you
Crackers?
eat? Yeah, the graham crackers.
The graham
cracker
crackers,
industry has got to be so excited about. Like I feel like you might have kept them afloat recently.
Yeah, no kidding.
I would think they've seen upticks, but I've reached out and not hearing anything from Nabisco.
Oh, that's so funny.
So if you don't know, Megan eats graham crackers, carries them everywhere as an easy way to get carbs, no matter what.
And she has
cheap and easy, and
she also has a big toast crunkler following.
Yes, toast. People, and that came from the same thing. People were like, "Wait, you eat bread every day?" And I was like, "Oh man, I need to make sure everyone knows I always eat bread every single day. Like this is, a very big misconception that we can't have bread as runners." So,
and not just bread. You eat bread and pickles and siracha.
Yeah, it actually is very good.
I tried it.
She's like, not for me.
I've it a couple times. I actually like the one you did with the peanut butter and pickles. Actually, that's really yummy.
Yeah, that's my favorite for sure.
Yeah.
Especially after a hot run. Yeah, we need the salt. Yep. I totally agree. Yeah.
So anyway, we will look forward to seeing you on July 31st in the heat and the humidity. We hope that you can get in and out of St. Pete quickly up to Connecticut.
Is there a certain mileage you're running on that night, or is it just,
They've all been like 3 to 5 miles.
Okay, perfect.
None of them have been more than that. Most of them are 3. Yeah. So even if you do your run in the morning, we probably will as well come for a few fun miles in the evening.
Awesome.
And we just, appreciate you being an inspiration for helping people to see how important eating correctly can be, not just because you want to be a better runner, but it makes you a happier runner, makes you a happier person, and eventually, hopefully, it means you're not going to be as injured.
We want happy runners.
Happy we get to do this. This is supposed to be fun.
Yes,
it's my mantra all the time.
Hobby. It's supposed to be fun, guys. Don't make your hobby a stressor.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Megan. We'll see you in July or late in the end of the month.
Thank you for having me, y'all.
Bye.
Bye, Megan.
Bye.